Today my world gets a little bit brighter, actually a whole lot brighter, because I've been given the chance to check out the brand new ALTIQ Rogue MK3 spotlights, and I am so excited for these. So let's roll the montage and get into it. Now, if you've never heard of ALTIQ before, I'm not surprised because it's a relatively new name in the lighting game, but the company behind these brand new Rogue MK3s have been making some epic spotlights for years, and you probably know them better as Supernova lighting. They're responsible for those legendary infinite spotlights that are around on my old Ford Ranger. Actually, when I sold that Ford Ranger, the only piece I kept were those infinite spotlights, and I've had them on the Dmax for the last 18 months. But these new Rogues take things to a whole new level. Now, the new Rogue MK3s have been provided to the channel for me to test out and review, but as always, ALTIQ hasn't had any input whatsoever on this video. We'll run through all the tech specs later in this video, but these are apparently brighter than the original Infinites, have a wider spread, and produce a nicer color temperature, which if all that's true would make these one of, if not the best sets of spotlights on the market right now. Of course, we won't take their word for it. We'll do our very own testing once these are installed on the bull bar of the car, and I'm also planning to do some side-by-side comparisons between these new Rogues and the original Infinites, so you guys can see those differences for yourself. However, before we get into any of that, let's get these unboxed and take a look at these brand new spotlights. Now, I do have a bit of a confession to make. I have already had a peek in these boxes because I had to figure out a way to mount these spotties to my bull bar, but let me crack open one of these boxes and show you some of the most impressive packaging I've ever seen on a set of spotlights. So inside our cardboard box, we find our spotlight enclosed in its very own carry case, which is so fancy. And this is a nice case too. So there's some ALTIQ branding on the top there, really nice heavy duty handle, and just a nice case overall. Inside our nice case, we find our brand new Rogue MK3 spotlight, which looks fantastic. It's nice and heavy, which is what you want for a good quality spotlight, and it looks so striking. That design is really just something else. So it's all blacked out too, which is nice. It's one of the thickest brackets I've ever seen. So that's a 17mm alloy bracket down there with the ALTIQ branding on the side there. Some really nice angles that are going to match in with my bull bar nicely as well. So the paint on here is actually DuPont black paint, which is designed to be incredibly thick, resistant to stone chips, and it shouldn't fade at all. I suppose time will tell in that department, but I've heard pretty good things about that. You can see on the front here, the spotlights come pre-installed with these covers in place. Traditionally, I'm not really a fan of covers. I normally take them off straight away, but these do look quite nice and actually allow your daytime running lights to shine through on the edges there, which is a really nice touch. I'm not convinced these new covers are as secure as the old Infinite covers that used to clip around the edges, but I suppose time will tell how well they stay on. They are going to be releasing some new covers coming out pretty soon in future too that you can just clip on in place instead of these blackout ones, and they'll be for additional flood and also amber covers as well. Now, I'm a big fan of the amber covers. I ran them on the old Infinites for a couple of months and they make a massive difference to really long distance nighttime driving. Just a lot less fatiguing on the eyes. They do dim the brightness down a little bit, but honestly with the amount of light these spotlights put out, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for those amber covers coming soon. You'll also notice on the bottom here there's a red insert. So these are a bit of like a customizable piece to suit your setup. You'll see in the box we also get a grey one as well, so you can swap that out and just give you a bit of a customization for your spotlights. I quite like the red and it kind of matches the recovery points in my bull bar, so I'm only leaving mine red, but you can switch to grey if you like, and they are actually bringing out a whole range of different colours as well, so you can chuck one on to match your vehicle. So on the front here, obviously that's the lens of the spotlight. This is a General Electric Lexan lens, which are nearly indestructible and they won't haze up at all over the years, and I can definitely vouch for both those points because my old Infinites had the exact same lenses, and after 2.5 years and after ramming those spotlights through the bush many a time, those spotlights are still in perfect condition, not a spot of damage on that lens, and they're still crystal clear. On the side here we find anti-theft bolts, which is almost essential in this day and age when people think they can get some free set of spotlights by just nicking yours. Also included in the case with each spotlight is a little toolkit to get it installed. So pretty basic, we just get our 2 Allen keys, including our 1 torque set Allen key at the top there. We also get 3 bolts, 3 washers, and 3 nylock nuts. And on the back of each spotlight, you'll find our wiring harness plug just on the end there. And that brings us on to the next part of this unboxing, which is going to be the very comprehensive wiring kit. So here's our wiring kit all laid out, and it's pretty simple. There's basically 5 main components, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Starting on the left, here's our master switch for the spotlights, which will run into the cab of the vehicle to be able to turn our spotlight system on and off. Obviously, they'll still only work with the high beam of the vehicle. This is more of a master switch just to turn the whole system off. And in the line here as well is a nice quick connector, so you can get that wiring in through your firewall quite easily rather than trying to put that whole switch through, so that's a nice touch. Moving along, we get our factory high beam connectors. This is how the wiring kit knows when your high beam is activated. So what you do is you take one of these 2 included adapters, find the one that matches your headlight design. You'll either have a plug that looks like that or one that looks like that behind one of your headlights. Just remove the factory plug, insert this instead, plug your factory connector into this side just there so that whole wiring piece is unaffected. And then that will give us an extra little plug on the side here, which then connects into our factory wiring kit. Just like that. And now the wiring kit knows when your high beam is activated. So moving along, we have a relay that's all pre-wired and heat shrinked, so nothing to do with that other than find somewhere under your bonnet to bolt it securely in place. We have our nice thick battery connections here. So they're really nice thick wiring, and the positive has a fuse pre-installed, nice and close to that positive terminal, which is great. And that is some really beefy wiring there, which is good to see. Plenty of power to run these new beastie spotties. And then moving along, the final piece of the puzzle is our 2 connectors that actually plug into those new spotlights once they're installed. You'll also notice there's some yellow wiring coming off the back here. That's the power supply for those daytime running lights. So if your vehicle has daytime running lights, you want to find the power supply for those and run it across to these yellow wires to activate the daytime running lights. Well, I reckon it's about time to put that wiring kit to some good use and get these spotties installed on the Dmax. Now, as much as I love my bull bar for its looks, it's a bit of a prick when it comes to installing spotlights. Because it's so tight to the vehicle, the actual strip of metal here where you're supposed to mount spotlights to is not enough surface area to mount pretty much any spotlights I've ever come across. So massive shout out to Bianca's Uncle Alan for making up some custom spotlight mounting brackets for me. He's welded these to the bull bar. They are super strong, super durable, and built to perfectly suit these Rogue Mark IIIs. So now I can mount those securely and all be well. So the next step for me is going to be to take the included mounting kit and bolt these spotties to my new custom brackets. After bolting the Rogues to my bull bar, it's time to get stuck into the wiring. Now, it's always a good idea to remove the fuse while you're installing any 12-volt accessory just to be safe, so that's what I'll do first. Next, we need somewhere to mount our relay, and this existing bolt right next to my battery is perfect. With the relay secured, it's time to run the positive and negative wires to my battery and bolt them firmly in place. I'm also adding a bit of conduit here to protect this small section of wiring between the positive post of my battery and the fuse. Now it's just a matter of plugging in my high beam patch cable, running the switch wiring into the cab, and connecting the spotties to the wiring kit. There we go, spotties are fully installed and looking pretty cool on the bull bar. That was probably a 15 or 20 minute install, I'd say, with that included wiring kit, if I was to subtract the time it took me to set up cameras and whatnot. The only thing I did differently from that included wiring kit was I did cut off the included switch because I wanted to use my own instead that's specific for my vehicle. But other than that, the install was an absolute piece of cake, and these spotlights look absolutely wicked. Loving the look that's giving the whole bull bar. Oh, and let me show you the daytime running lights as well. I reckon those daytime running lights look really, really cool. However, if they're not your speed, they are optional, so you don't actually have to connect those up if you're not wanting to run those. So it just comes down to personal preference, really. Now, while we're waiting for this sun to go down, let's run through a couple of numbers. So these new Rogue Mark 3s are 165 watts each, and together they produce over 35,000 lumens. Now that's about 4,000 lumens more than my old pair of Infinites, which were already insanely bright, and they'll put out 1 lux at over 2.25 kilometers. Now there's no denying those are some pretty impressive numbers. However, what's more important to me, and probably to you guys as well, is how these perform in the real world. I'm talking about like what the beam pattern's like. Is it really narrow, or is there a nice generous spread to see wildlife on the side of the road, and also what that color temperature of the light actually is. So let's flash forward a couple of hours and see what's what. Alrighty, it is time. I've come down to a familiar stretch of road that I've used to test out a few set of spotlights in the past. Essentially, it's just a dark country road, which in my opinion is exactly where you'd appreciate a good set of spotlights. So let's fire these up and see how bright they are. There we go. They're certainly putting out a pretty decent amount of light, lighting up that whole road ahead pretty much as far as I can see. I remember being blown away by the distance those old Infinites gave us when I first tested those out. And it's a bit of deja vu here because I'm experiencing that same feeling right now. It just blows me away that LEDs can shine that far down the road. Spread's kind of always been LED's main department, which is why people used to team light bars with old-fashioned HRD spotlights, but these can honestly do it all. The spread seems pretty decent too, certainly are jutting out pretty immediately from the edges of the vehicle, and I think that's what's important when it comes to a good set of spotlights. Just glancing at them now, I feel like they're giving off a more impressive spread than the Infinites when I first tested those without their flood covers. The color temperature seems pretty nice as well as far as LEDs are concerned. Now, obviously being LED, they're not going to be as warm a color as the old school halogens or HIDs, but as far as LEDs are concerned, these aren't too bad and shouldn't be too fatiguing on the eyes. So they're pretty impressive while stationary, but you're not going to buy a set of spotlights to park your car in the middle of the road. So let's go for a drive around these dark country roads and see how they perform. So on this dark country road, the Rogues are lighting up absolutely everything. We can see a hell of a long way down the road, but more importantly, they're also giving us great visibility of the edges of the road, which is where we want to be keeping an eye out for any wandering wildlife. To give you an idea how these lights compare to my factory Dmax lighting situation, here's the car running just the factory low beam. Now I'll toggle across to the factory high beam, which does increase things somewhat, but this is still unsafe for long distance night driving. And finally, here's the Rogue 8.5s, and the difference is pretty insane. And if you're wondering how they compare to the old Infinites, here's a side-by-side comparison as promised. So first up, here's the Infinites with no covers installed, and here's the Rogues. Brightness wise, honestly, they're both insane, but the main difference I can see is that the Rogues give us a much greater spread of light across the road without seeming to impact the long range throw, giving us a nice coverage of light across the whole road. The color temperature also seems a bit warmer on the Rogues too, which should make them less fatiguing on the eyes for long distance driving. Okay, so final thoughts on the Mark III Rogues. They are insanely bright with crazy long range, really impressive for LEDs. They've got decent spread, probably a bump up from the old Infinites, which is a welcome change in my books. The color temperature seems quite nice as far as LED lights are concerned. Obviously, they're not going to be as warm as old school halogens or HIDs, but we do get a ton more brightness, which in my books is a pretty fair trade. And they've got the same tough lenses that the old Infinites had, which I know firsthand can take a lot of abuse. They're not cheap spotlights, they're definitely up the top end of the market, but in my opinion at least, they've justified their place there and their price tag by their quality and their performance. I generally think it's worth investing in good gear that's going to last if you're actually going to use it. And I think that's the key there, because there's no point investing in the top of the range spotlights if you never do any long distance night driving. However, if you do, then these spotlights are pretty hard to beat. Now, if you're planning on picking up a set of Rogues for yourself, I've actually organised a bit of a discount code just for you guys, and I'll chuck that discount code in the description down below because it might get updated from time to time, just as a way of making sure that it's only you guys that get to use that code. Well, that wraps up my first look at the new ALTIQ Rogue Mark III spotlights and today's Spotlight Sunday episode. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comment section down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.